everyone. So waiting for some people to jump in. Figured I'd just give a little bit of an intro. So like my previous video, a little bit of background on me. I worked in forensic biochemistry for several years and did a lot of forensic research. So I wanted to start this channel as a way of discussing crimes and giving ideas and theories and thoughts behind what happens in these different events, what the thought processes are behind the people who commit them. And so this is the second video in the series. Sorry, I've been a little late on posting and streaming, working a lot of hours at work, and I end up falling asleep before it's even time to start streaming, and as it goes, I end up not streaming. So trying to get better on schedule with that, and bringing up our next topic. It's going to be on Dr. Teresa Sievers. And I have a little bit of an interesting background with this case. It, kind of like the other one, actually happened right around an area where I lived. And funny enough, my mom was actually one of her patients and absolutely adored her. So this is kind of a close to home case again, but we'll be branching out a little bit more in the future as far as close to home cases go. So not all of them are going to be something that I'm actually sort of tied to, but some of these, the more interesting ones to me, were these cases. So my mic keeps moving just a little bit, so you might see me kind of adjusting it throughout the talk, but I also encourage people to jump in the Discord to talk. My Discord is linked to my Twitch. You should be able to jump right in and join me on YouTube, join me on Facebook. Again, you can keep following me on Twitch. I'm going to try to be much better about following a schedule and also getting some games up. So not just talking about crimes, but also playing some games. Even though I kind of suck at them, I'm going to at least attempt and get some games up and going. Also, my cat snuck in here before I got started, so if you happen to see her cross in front of the camera, it's just my cat. And she might be a little freaked out because it just started raining, so I decided to let her stay in here so she's comfortable. Another thing to note is you might be seeing me look off to the side as such. I have a script that I have written based off of all the research I've done on this case off to the side. I want to make sure to not necessarily always go verbatim based on the script, but to keep a format going so I don't get too off track or start talking on random topics or lose my place, so that we can get essentially to the meat of what happened and not keep going off to the side dishes. So a little background on Teresa Sievers' case is it was located in Bonita Springs, Florida. And this actually occurred back in June of 2015. So I say, okay, Discord's up and running. So I say, let's just go ahead and dive right in. So in June of 2015, 46-year-old Dr. Teresa Sievers had been enjoying a vacation with her husband, Mark Sivers, and her two young daughters, visiting family in upstate New York. Being committed to treating her patients at her holistic medical practice, Restorative Health and Healing Center, Teresa decided it would be best for her to catch an earlier flight and come in on that Monday morning and get right back to work. And the rest of her family actually stayed back in upstate New York, Mark and her two daughters, and stayed with the family up there. And they were totally understanding of Teresa needing to get back to work. She was very dedicated, had a high demand career, and was essentially kind of the breadwinner of the family. And everyone supported her, everyone was behind her, and they understood when she needed to go back to work. So nobody complained, nobody argued with her, and off she went. So Teresa caught an earlier flight back home on Sunday, June 28th. And she wanted to get in early so she could be up and ready for the next morning. And shockingly, the next day, it was very unlike Teresa to do this, her colleagues were surprised that she didn't actually show up that next Monday morning. she was compassionate, very outgoing, loved her job, very comforting to the patients, and it really wasn't like her to just no call, no show, just to not show up. That wasn't in her nature. So, sorry, a little bit of a dry throat today. So her colleagues began to call her cell phone. They got no response. They reached out to Mark. They reached out to anyone they knew. And again, not one person could actually get a hold of her. So because of this, Mark asked one of their neighbors, Dr. Mark Petrites, excuse me if I get that name wrong, to go by the house and check on Teresa and see if she was there. As the neighbor had gotten to the house, he'd walked into the kitchen and was greeted by a really grisly scene. Teresa was found on the floor, appearing to be beaten to death with a hammer that was laid down beside her. When the neighbor called 911, he mentioned, "She's bashed in the back of the head, and she's cold. She's dead cold." It was reported that she'd been hit with a hammer at least 17 times, and her death was caused by blunt force trauma to her skull. Goodness. So investigators arrived to her house and they were absolutely stumped. There were no signs of forced entry. The house had not been ransacked, as one might assume in a home invasion. And there was even a safe with more than $40,000 in cash that was inside the home that remained intact, and the money was still there. So obviously this suggested that this crime wasn't due to a robbery or a cash grab or anything that involved financial crime. It wasn't, basically a burglary in this sense was completely ruled out. So with Mark and the daughter still out of the state and on their New York vacation, immediate family committing the murder was ruled out. There was no way. None of them were there. Teresa was the only one that came back, but even then, they were gone for quite a while before she even got back, and they were still gone. So there was really no crossover of time there. So they were ruled out. But the investigators knew that at this point, they were going to have a really difficult situation to figure out. So majority of the crimes, I would say, tend to have quite a bit of evidence that leads one way or the other as far as a motive. Now, there are some bigger crimes you hear in the news, and the reason they tend to make the news is because of the lack of a motive, a lack of a direction. So it's more of a media way to reach out and try to get some answers that way. But there are a lot of cases that tend to have pretty obvious motives from the start. So investigators in this case were very unsure of what was going on, and this was actually starting to make local news as they were reaching out to media at the time. And I remember when this happened as well. And I remember seeing it on the news quite a bit. And in this case, the investigators really weren't sure where to go, but figured the first things to do, you always question the last person who saw him, you question colleagues, you question family, you question friends, you question anybody who had some sort of relationship, in this case with Teresa. So, a little bit of background on Teresa. Teresa Sievers was born in November 1968 in Derby, Connecticut. Always keeping her education in the forefront, she graduated valedictorian in 1986 from Ansonia High School and Fairfield University in 1990 with a Master's of Science in Biology. In 1996, Teresa graduated with honors from Ross University School of Medicine. Following graduation, she completed her residency at the University of Florida and was awarded Resident of the Year. She then became a board-certified doctor in internal medicine and opened up her own practice in 2006 after she had moved to Bonita Springs. Along with her own practice, she was also on staff at the Naples Community Hospital. In 2008, Teresa completed a board certification and fellowship at the American Academy of Anti-Aging Regenerative and Functional Medicine. In the years following, she also obtained her second master's degree in metabolic and nutritional medicine from the University of South Florida. and always being interested in Eastern medicine, she really honed a focus on energetic healing and treating the whole body. So you'll see this a lot with doctors having either MD or DO at the end of their name. So you either have medical doctor or doctor of osteopathic medicine. And she was an MD, so it's pretty much your standard run-of-the-mill doctor. You have a pain, you get medicine. You have a break, you get a cast. You need surgery, you go in for surgery. But then you have DOs, which will give you these treatments, but will also see if they can find any sort of change in your lifestyle or some sort of maybe mental health clearance, something more so to treat you as a whole to prevent this issue from getting worse or even reverse the issue. So even with her being an MD, she really stepped more into the holistic approach, the whole body approach, and was more interested in that. She wanted her patients to live long, happy lives and not be so reliant on constant treatment if it can be avoided. So her motto to her patients was, I am passionate about empowering you to tap into the doctor within you. So this goes back again to the whole holistic approach, having people understand more about their bodies, how to treat themselves better in order to help reverse or prevent a disease from getting worse. And that was really her main goal. So as soon as the word of her death had been made public, theories started circulating. Being known for her alternative view on medicine, it was thought that her death may actually have been linked to reports of other alternative doctors dying in suspicious circumstances around the country. So looking past potential conspiracy theories, the investigators focused on any patients that may have had an issue with her. Being outgoing and a strong force, it could lead to come across as abrasive to some. And there have been cases in the past where patients have hurt or even killed their doctors because of distrust, dislike, not agreeing with treatments, and a spouse dying under their watch. And you see it all the time in shows like Grey's Anatomy and ER and probably even Scrubs at some point. You see that they do series on patients who come back to attack doctors. So that was kind of their first lead to go. But unfortunately, despite everything they looked through, there were absolutely no leads that they could find. They did notice something really odd about the situation, though. They felt that Mark Sivers was acting very strangely for a man who just lost his wife. The day before her funeral, he was seen at the beach and inviting people over to their house for a pool party. When people tried to comfort him, he acted cold towards them. On the day of the funeral, an anonymous witness stated that they spotted Mark at the medical practice that Teresa owned, tossing out computers and materials into the trash. People speculated that it may have just been shock of loss that was making him act so differently. Everyone reacts differently when they're faced with tragedy and dealing with grief. But with him being so far away during the murders, still being in upstate New York, suspicions that he played a role were pretty much dismissed. He couldn't have done it. He wasn't there. There was plenty of evidence, plenty of an alibi, a strong enough alibi that he could prove he could not have done it. And again, this goes despite acting very strange with his grief. And again, people do act really strange when it comes to grief. And I remember a story where a mother had lost her daughter and was seen celebrating on the gravesite at her daughter's, what would have been her daughter's birthday, with like streamers and balloons and silly string. And that raised a lot of eyebrows. And she claimed that there was a period of silence before she was being filmed. And then after they did their period of silence, they decided to have a little party for her, figuring that that's what she would have wanted. Now, if I remember correctly, I do believe in the end of that case, she was actually found guilty, but I can't quite remember, so don't quote me on that. Maybe that's a case I can do in the future. But for now, oh, thank you. Thank you for the follow. But for now, We're just going to focus on this case and the fact that despite the suspicions of Mark's attitude towards the situation, he couldn't have done it. He physically was not there. So about 2 weeks of hitting dead ends, the investigators finally got their break. A tip came in from Missouri, of all places, to report that a man named Curtis Wayne Wright, 51 years old, known in their area for a lengthy rap sheet, had confessed to the murder to them. After honing in on Curtis, the investigation was expanded to include another suspect. His name was Jimmy Ray Rogers, 29 years old, also a known criminal in the area. Both men were pulled in for questioning and, of course, denied involvement in the crime. But after reviewing GPS data from a rental car that they had used, investigators were able to prove that both of the men had driven from Missouri to Bonita Springs right before the crime occurred. Surveillance video was even found at a Florida Walmart that showed both of the men together purchasing items including a black towel, black shoes, and a lockpicking kit. Sounds pretty suspicious. So, Curtis and Jimmy were easily linked together as having met in prison. Curtis was in for drug charges, Jimmy was in for weapon charges, but how does their connection lead them to link to Teresa? Well, interesting story, Curtis and Mark Sivers had actually grown up together in Missouri and remained best friends through their entire life, even having a really strange, uncanny resemblance to each other. If I had a photo, I'd bring it up, and it is insane how much these two guys looked alike. Curtis had even been a guest at Teresa and Mark's wedding and even went to Teresa's funeral. When needed, Curtis would even do work on computers at Teresa's clinic. He even had Mark as his best man at his wedding. So as to why this family friend would target Teresa, investigators really needed to dig deeper on this. So the first person that investigators spoke to was Jimmy's girlfriend, Taylor Showmaker. And she had told them that Jimmy had confessed to her about the murder. She took the investigators to the spot where Jimmy had disposed of bloody clothing from the crime scene. Due to the surmounting evidence, Jimmy was eventually convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. Curtis pled guilty to second-degree murder and got 25 years due to a deal that he had made with investigators. The deal was to admit who had planned this murder and who had committed the actual killing. Jimmy had been the one to kill Teresa, he said. And although they were the ones who had actually traveled down to Bonita to kill Teresa, the plan to get them down there was actually put together by Mark Sivers. A journal was found by investigators on Mark's cell phone that revealed that him and Teresa had been having a lot of issues in their marriage at the time. In this journal, he regularly detailed the ups and downs of their relationship. He claimed that he was losing trust in his wife over a perceived relationship he thought that she had had, that she seemed indifferent towards him and his unmet needs for sex and intimacy. He said he felt like a leech to Teresa. She was the sole breadwinner of the family, and he felt that all he was just a leech on her side. In March, before the murder, Mark wrote a long journal entry in which he accused Teresa of almost cheating on him, among other indiscretions he wrote consistently on. Less than a month before her murder, Mark wrote, "She said sometimes, most of the time, she does not feel like we're going to make it." He felt that his wife only saw him as too dependent on her, and that he only thought about sex. As the end of June was approaching, though, it seemed like their relationship was on an upswing. Mark wrote that he and Teresa were in a good place. She was kissing him unsolicited. This was so new to him, and compared to the past entries that he wrote into that journal, where he felt like he'd been ignored, that she didn't want to go around him, she didn't want to kiss him, she didn't want to touch him, she didn't want to hug him, nothing, to now she's just kissing him without being asked. This was really unheard of to him, and he was so excited, he wrote it down in his journal. But this was really contrary to evidence that was found on both of them. Both of the Sivers had had numerous affairs before, together and outside of their marriage. Mark's text messages showed that he regularly exchanged lusty messages with other women. He felt that Teresa had rejected him, that their relationship must already be over, and that she did not want a divorce, though. Mark felt that if they did divorce, he would have custody of their daughters. Teresa would only be granted visitation. So this is really interesting. I find that the timing of this particular text message very interesting because it was right before the actual murder took place that suddenly there was a change of emotion, there was an upswing. One of the number one signs that something strange is going on or something is going to happen that could be detrimental or traumatic is usually a complete 180 in someone's personality, especially in this case where he had a long history of writing these journal entries of how the relationship wasn't going well, how he felt like a leech, he felt forgotten, and then all of a sudden things were great. That's not realistic. And that is a number one sign that he was probably planning something at this point. Now, I don't know if you can obviously tell just from the text messages, oh, he was going to plan to kill her. Nothing like that, but the big change in personality is a huge, huge difference and a huge sign that something weird's going on. It's another thing I want to talk about in this case, and just a trigger warning, this has to do with suicide. And again, as I forgot to mention at the beginning, apologies for that, is please advise discretion when you're listening to this channel and watching any of these videos, as we do get into some pretty dark things. But going back to the suicide mention, it's also a number one sign in suicide when someone is about to commit or attempt. They will change their personality almost in a 180. So when they were seemingly depressed, anxious, really to themselves, if they suddenly become extremely lively, if they start giving away all their stuff and wanting to go out more and doesn't really seem like them in a very quick turnaround time, most of the time that means that they have already agreed to plan on their attempt. So just a heads up to anyone who's dealing with that or has a friend that they're noticing this in, please reach out and help them. And I know there are many of different suicide hotlines to contact and reach out. Even if you are not suicidal yourself, you can reach out and still talk to them about advice on how to help your friends and your loved ones. So just to get back on track, with these marital problems that were mounting, along with serious financial issues and a total of $4 million of life insurance on Teresa, Mark reached out to Curtis with the promise to pay him $10,000 to kill Teresa. Mark was subsequently arrested, and this sent shockwaves out into the community. I even remember when this was on the news, and in fact, I actually lived right down the street when all this was happening. And I remember when this was on the news, and we're like, that is crazy. She was such a loved member of the community, but we don't see what goes on behind closed doors. We don't see the issues that people have and can be so quick to assume that everything looks happy on the outside. So again, another assumption that we can't make is that there's no way that a loved one or someone within the family could do this because they loved them so much. They were so happy together. Look at all these pictures. Look at all these videos of them together. They're so happy. But we don't know what goes on the inside. So there's a lot of things, beliefs we need to suspend when it comes to situations like this, unfortunately. And it's really sad that this is a very common situation. You hear it a lot in crime shows, is 9 times out of 10 it's the husband. 9 times out of 10 it's the wife. And unfortunately, there's a lot of data to back up that truth. And one thing that I studied when I worked in forensics is a lot of times it's people that you know that can target you. It's your friend, it's your husband, your wife, your kids even, that can target you. And a lot of times they are the ones who are committing these murders because they know the insides. They have these relationships with you that could be going through traumatic issues and problems and non-communication and dealing with it in a very, very dramatic and unfortunate way. So again, when it comes to these kinds of cases, we have to suspend the disbelief of the outer picture. They look happy, they look like they get along. That's not, most of the time, that's not always the case. Relationships have problems, and some people unfortunately deal with it in this kind of way. So he was arrested. It sent shockwaves out to the community, and cell phone data was actually recovered via a burner phone in the weeks leading up to Teresa's murder. And it showed that Mark and Curtis had been communicating, and Curtis's phone pinged near the Sivers home on that Monday morning. So, moving forward ahead of time, now we're going to trial with these 3 different suspects. So the first of the trio to go to trial was Jimmy Rogers on October 2019. So this took a good almost 4.5 years to finally get to trial, to finally get some justice for Teresa. And Curtis Wright was the main witness in this particular case, again, as part of his agreement with the investigators. When asked who had killed Teresa, he replied, "I did, and Jimmy Rogers." He said that he'd hit Teresa 3 times with the hammer. Afterwards, Jimmy had taken the hammer from him and continued to hit her repeatedly. Their motive? The money. The money that was promised to them from Mark when the job was completed. Mark didn't testify in this trial, and his lawyers claimed that Curtis had killed Teresa and that he could not be trusted as a witness because he was a career criminal. So this is another interesting topic to bring up, is should career criminals be allowed to be witnesses in other cases? Most of the time, these different criminals are actually given plea agreements or an agreement for a lesser sentence, or if they're already serving a time off their sentence, rather. And then they go to trial. But how much can they be trusted? Are they telling the truth? So you think when people are in prison, a lot of times it's kind of hopeless. There's no way out. This is going to be life. I have the sentence and this is what it is now. And people talk. People talk a lot. Especially when there's not much to do. People do talk about their crimes. And a lot of times, depending on the type of crime, they boast about it. So it's very likely that they could boast to these criminals who end up getting plea agreements or sentence modifications if they testify. How much are they telling the truth is really up to the jury and up to the judge. So in this case, Mark and his lawyers were trying to get Curtis thrown out on the case of he's got a rap sheet a mile wide. He can't be trusted. He's lying. He's obviously lying, right? Well, a lot of the evidence shows that he actually wasn't lying. And the fact that he even admitted to the killing himself kind of puts him up there as probably telling the truth. But that's me just erring more on that side. It's really up to you to decide if you would believe him or not. But just considering all the evidence that was going on and the evidence that the investigators found, to me it feels like he is telling the truth. So the next trial was of Mark Sivers, and again, Curtis was the main witness to testify on this case as well against his former best friend. Curtis said that although he and Jimmy had physically killed Teresa, Mark had planned the murder due to financial problems. Mark believed that Teresa was planning on leaving him and taking the kids, and this is even despite the fact that he said Teresa did not want a divorce. He still wholeheartedly believed that Teresa was out to plot against him by taking the kids from him. And I don't know about you, but if you're going to kill someone for the fact that you believe that they're going to take your kids away from you, probably not the best idea, considering the fact that you're going to go to jail for life and your kids will never trust you. And I can't say if they love him or care about him anymore. I'm not in that place. I'm not them. But you're pretty much guaranteeing for a fact that you will not see them and you will not have custody of your kids. So if you're ever in a headspace where you feel stressed out and you feel like this is a potential answer, just know that you are guaranteeing that you will never get custody of your kids. Just bite the bullet, deal with the divorce, and work it out in court. You're going to save yourself and your kids a whole lot of pain and headaches and loss. So back to the story, Curtis said that Mark told him that due to her planning on leaving him and planning on taking the kids, that the only way to deal with this, the only option, was to kill Teresa. Mark was then found guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Mark later made a statement that he was innocent. The judge told him, "I judge people's actions. I don't judge people's souls. That's for somebody else to do." And then he sentenced Mark to the death penalty. So in a personal statement by Teresa's family, they are heartbroken not only for the loss of Teresa, but for the fact that her daughters will have to grow up with only the memories of her. Mark's attorneys filed a notice of appeal on February 10th, 2020. He's currently on death row at Florida State Prison in Wright, Florida. So that's as far as much information as I have on this case currently. And from knowing through my family members that were patients of hers, she was a very, very sweet, loving woman, very spunky, just this tiny ball of energy. But she really cared about her patients. She really wanted to empower them to be more informed, to make very smart decisions on their own behalf, to be their own advocates. She also wanted to help them lead healthier lifestyles so they didn't have to, say, rely on blood pressure medication for the rest of their lives. Just things she wanted them to be more in charge of how their lives went. And it saddens me to know what kind of person she really was, and to know it firsthand, to realize that her husband was such a monster and so desperate for the star role in his family, just so desperate to be the head honcho of the whole family, that he was this willing to get rid of her. That they had these financial problems because, again, she was the sole breadwinner. She was the one making the most money. And at times she'd get stressed wondering why he wasn't working hard enough, and why is he not bringing in enough money? We're going almost paycheck to paycheck now. And she was a doctor, like a full-fledged medical doctor. They make good money, obviously, but taking care of their daughters, running her own clinic, and her being the main breadwinner, it was stressful. And of course, with stress, you're going to add more relationship issues with all kinds of different people that you know, and especially with your spouse, with your significant other, or in this case, insignificant other. He was that upset and angry at her life and how her life had turned out, especially considering the fact that at the beginning, when I had mentioned about how proud they were of her, that was the facade he was putting on, was the pride he had for her, because it was non-existent. It wasn't there. It was jealousy, it was rage, it was anger and depression, and just this hate that he had for the success she had, for the fact that she might eventually just walk off and take everything from him, instead of realizing maybe she's a very thoughtful person, that she could come to a good agreement as far as visitation goes, as far as sharing custody goes, and that not everything revolves around needing to be attached to her. And it is really unfortunate, and it makes me really sad that this happened to her, and that a really good doctor and a really good person was taken out of this world. And I do know that from some witnesses that had been around her office, especially when Mark was around, he acted very cold to the staff and cold to the patients. He didn't really talk much to them. He was very awkward, very standoffish, and just seemed to not have much of a grasp on social interaction. Nothing like her, polar opposite to Teresa. And there were so many other ways for them to deal with this issue. And I can't speak for her. I don't know how much effort she wanted to put back into the relationship, how much effort she put into communication. But I do know that when somebody is struggling with this hate and depression and denial, that it becomes difficult to talk to them on a level-headed playing field. That it's difficult to snap someone out who's already so deep in it and try to get an educational, intelligent conversation out of them. So for all we know, she could have tried to discuss, hey, I need you to start working more. I need you to help me with bills more. I need you to help, with XYZ. And he just flushed it out the window without even thinking about it. So pretty much this is about the end of the stream. This is about the end of the case. And I'm hoping to get some more cases up in the future, multiple during a stream. But I'd like to hear some more from you guys. You can either reach out on Facebook, you can reach me in my Discord, you can reach me on Twitch, you can reach me on YouTube, because I'll be putting this video up directly after the stream. But what I want to leave you guys with is when you see different couples, and I guess this is really prevalent right now because there's actually a case all over the news about a young couple where the female of the couple had actually gone missing after a trip. So they were seen as a happy couple as well. On the outside, all their videos, they produced, I believe it was a vlog of sorts about living van life, essentially living in their van, traveling in their van. And they had traveled out on this vacation out to the Grand Canyon, I want to say, or Yosemite Park, something like that. And they'd traveled out together, and he came back in her van and she's gone. I think it goes without saying that already evidence gathered from this situation alone makes him very, very suspicious. And when investigators talked to him, he didn't want to talk. He said, I want nothing to do with this. I'm just in the background. And the family was like, please say something. You were the last one to see her. You could answer this for us. He said no. So I don't know about you, but from all the cases that I've studied in the past and just my initial forensic training tells me he did it. He's guilty. Now, this is just my idea. Again, as I've stated in the past, I don't work for any police departments. I don't work for any forensic labs. But this is just my own speculation. Everything points to him. He is and I believe he has been named as a person of interest and may have actually been arrested tonight. I know there was a live stream by the local news over where they lived that their investigators are at his house trying to get him out. So I haven't seen the progression of that. I saw it was on earlier, so he may or may not have been arrested. But on the outside, they were described as a very happy couple. And it was released a couple days ago. There was a video that was released about a week or two before they'd left for the trip. They were in a domestic dispute in which authorities had actually been called. And both of them were, I don't believe arrested, but both of them were talked to by the police. Now, I've mentioned this again before that I'm a domestic violence survivor. When there are domestic disputes, it's bad. There are bad things going on. If you are fighting bad enough that you have the cops called on you, that is not the only incident. That's not the only time. And from my guess, from just other cases, maybe somebody wanted to leave the relationship. Maybe somebody was cheating and admitted to it. Maybe there were financial issues or something of the case where their relationship was finally hitting a head and they were fighting so much and so loud that police got called this time. And the strange part about this is after getting the authorities out there talking to them, they leave on a vacation that they're excited about. I don't know about you, but when I was in a bad fight with my ex and he was hitting me and all just nasty stuff, I was not thrilled to go on vacations with him. I was not thrilled to be traveling with him. Again, everyone's different. This is just from my experience, but I feel just from that alone, and then them driving all the way out, and then her being gone and him driving back and saying, I'm not talking about anything, and driving her van no less. back without her, he's guilty. All signs point to it. And it goes back to the whole idea that not every picture perfect relationship that you see between people is true. It's very skin deep. And I'm not saying that these relationships can't be perfect or can't be very nice and wonderful, because there are relationships that look picture perfect that actually are great relationships. But a lot of times you have to err on the side of caution. If anything seems off, say something, especially if it's your loved ones and your friends and you see something's kind of funky about their relationship where they're happy 90% of the time, but then you notice they're fighting a lot more. Or, God forbid, you see some bruising on them. Male, female, whoever, in between. Like, you see them injured or dressing differently, almost like they're hiding things. Say something. You don't have to say it to both. Say something to them and talk in private. I don't want to go on a whole long thing about how to deal with domestic violence victims. That could be a topic for another video, which I am happy to discuss when I get there. But essentially, you just have to be patient with them and understand, and come from a place of being willing to listen and not necessarily talk or not necessarily solve all the problems, but be willing to listen to the problems and be their outlet. Even if you go, well, leave, you should leave. Not everyone's ready to leave yet. So that's just my little tidbit to leave with you guys tonight, is just to be on the lookout for strange signs in relationships, anything suspicious, and just keep your awareness up, especially in cases like this where they seem kind of tense or awkward around each other. And then when one ends up unfortunately getting murdered, look at the relationship first. Look at the deep stuff, the dark stuff, the stuff that we want to keep in our closets hidden as our own personal skeletons. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. I know it's never going to be a happy topic on this particular series, but I hope you enjoyed this video. I am promising to stay more on a schedule to get more of these out, but I really appreciate you sticking with me and following me on Facebook, Twitch, YouTube, and on my Discord and everything. It's always open. You can always ask if you need a link. And hopefully we'll be back next week with another video, or another case or two maybe. And so jump on and have some discussion, and hopefully within the next couple of weeks or months we can start getting some more people on the Discord so we can start openly chatting and extending our sessions a little bit. But gotta be patient, gotta wait and build them up. So thank you for joining me tonight. I hope you have a wonderful Friday or a wonderful Saturday if you are on somewhere else in the world, and have a great week and have a good night, guys.